So, good morning to all. We are here today. We got a topic today that we're going to try to tackle called, How Can I Ever Change? How can I ever change? For some people, that question is different than for others. Some people, that question might be, how can I ever lose those extra pounds? Right? For others, it might be, how can I change my situation, my marital status in life? How can I find a wife or find a husband? Or for a lot of folks, it's how can I beat that addiction that I have, whether it's to alcohol or some kind of drugs. I'm smoking crack, I'm on meth, or whatever, whatever it is. How can I change? How can I stop doing this? Whatever it is, we all kind of have that question of change. The interesting thing about change is you can change up or you can change down. You can change to the positive or you can change to the negative. Changing to the positive is growth. Because ultimately what we're here for is we're here to become like Jesus. That's our destination. Has anybody ever heard of the concept of predestination? Yeah, in the Bible? A lot of folks refer to predestination as being a concept that my destiny is in heaven. That's my destination. And that's true. That's true. But the Bible only uses the word predestination in two places. Once in Ephesians and once in Romans. And in both cases, it specifically says that we are predestined to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. That's our destination. Our destination is one where we're going to be matured to look just like Jesus. That's what it's all about. And so when we talk about change, we're actually talking about growth if change is in a positive way. If it's in a negative way, then we're kind of regressing. We're kind of going backwards, and the changes are bad. So what we're talking about today is the good change, the maturity change, the change to grow up, to become more like Jesus. To do that, we're going to look at a story. And it's an obscure Bible story, more obscure than most, one that you might not have heard. It's the story about Jacob when he wrestled with God. And it's a bit hard to understand, so we're gonna spend some time developing. I'm going to spend some time developing this story, all right? And one thing to keep in mind as I develop this story, because I'm going to probably lose some of you, you're going to go, why is he talking about all this stuff? Well, the reason is because if you're going to properly study the Bible, there's really three steps to it. The first step is to observe. When you approach the Bible, or really any subject, the first step is to observe. Read, reread, research, whatever you observe. And that asks and answers the question of, what do I see? What do I see? The second step to any kind of Bible study is to interpret. Now that you've observed and you can see something, okay, you've collected the data, now you ask and answer the question, what does it mean? All right, that's interpretation. And then finally, you got application. Application is, how does it work? And unfortunately, a lot of the times, guys will get up like me, and they got a message, and they're ready to go, and they'll just go right straight to trying to apply something. And it's like, well, that may or may not work too well. I don't think it works that great, because it ends up just me kind of giving you my opinion. And who am I? I'm nobody. You don't want my opinion, all right? If we do it the proper way, if we observe what the Bible has to say, and we interpret properly what it has said, then the application really comes from the Word of God. It doesn't come from a guy, okay? And it doesn't come then from me to you. It comes from God to us, It's not me telling you what you ought to do. It's God telling us how we all ought to live. And so I'm going to spend a little time going through this story. All right, so let's just read the story to start, and you're going to go, what does that mean? And then we'll come back, we'll give it some background, okay? So the story is Jacob wrestles with God, and it's found in Genesis chapter 32, and it reads like this. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till dawn, till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked, "Well, what's your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." That's kind of a bizarre story. We got this guy, and he's wrestling with this guy for an entire night. Well, first bit of background is, who is this guy, Jacob? Well, Jacob is the son of Isaac and was the son of Abraham. They lived in ancient times. And if you've ever heard out of the Bible the saying, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that's this guy. That's this Jacob, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, his grandfather, was actually a Chaldean. And God called him out of Ur of the Chaldees to come to a land that he would show him, the land that we know today as Israel. Okay? And he was really the first Jew. This was the birth of the Jewish nation, was Abraham. Well, Abraham he had two sons, but he had one son of prominence, Isaac, and the son of promise. And then Isaac had two sons, actually twins. They were fraternal twins, Esau and Jacob. So that's who Jacob is. Jacob is a pivotal guy in the Bible. He had 12 sons, and the 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel, became the nation. So he's kind of, in a sense, the father of the nation of Israel. So he's an important character, all right? Now, a little bit of background, if you look at your outline here, a little bit of background on Jacob's character. What kind of guy was Jacob up to the point of this story where he's wrestling? And he's wrestling with God there. Well, when he was born, like I said, he was a twin with Esau. And Esau came out first. And then, I don't exactly know how it happened. Maybe the hand came out from Jacob or whatever, I don't know. But he grabbed Esau's heel, all right? He clinched onto it. He wouldn't let go. At his birth. I mean, he isn't even out of the womb yet, and he's holding on to his brother. And so they named him Jacob. And the name Jacob actually means heel catcher. It means one who catches the heel. And really kind of, in a sense, a heel catcher is one who trips you up. He's a schemer. He's a liar. He's a manipulator. All right? That's what Jacob really means. All right? And he got his name from catching his brother's heel. And then, look at the other bullet points. He lived up to that name in his life. Later in his life, he tricked his brother into selling a birthright. All right? So Esau, being the firstborn, had the double portion coming to him. You know, maybe the inheritance or whatever. He had it all coming to him as the firstborn. And Jacob tricked him. Esau came in from the field. He was really hungry and whining and stuff. And Jacob said, well, I'll feed you. I'll give you food. But you got to promise me that you're going to give me your birthright. And he said, okay. And he kind of tricked him in a moment of hunger and weakness or whatever. I don't know. So he's a little bit of a trickster. The next thing that he did is, years later, as his father Isaac is getting old and blind, his father says, I'm old, I'm blind, I'm about to die. I want you boys to come in one at a time, and I'm going to give you a blessing. Okay, I'm going to give you kind of my final blessing for life that's going to carry you for your life. And Jacob went in disguise. Since his dad was blind, he could kind of put on some rough clothes and some hair, because his brother was really hairy. And he could go in, and he deceived his dad into giving him a blessing. This was such a big deal at the time that Jacob, after this event, swore to kill, Esau, did I say that right? Esau swore to kill Jacob for doing this, for deceiving the dad and stealing the blessing. Jacob said, I'm going to kill you. I'm not going to kill you today, but when dad's gone and dead, you're a dead man. Okay? So remember that. That's key to understanding a little bit of the background. So as a result, a few years later, Jacob fled from Esau. That's the next thing he did. And he fled to an uncle by the name of Laban. And he worked for Laban for many years for his wives. That was the deal back then. You worked for your wives. And he got 2 wives from Laban, 2 of his daughters. And then he manipulated, in the last years with Laban, he manipulated that situation with Laban and kind of he came to Laban with nothing. And then he took the flocks of Laban, and through careful breeding, selective breeding and such, he kind of stole away all the wealth from Laban. And he ended up with huge flocks, and Laban ended up with a few sickly animals or something like that, right? So he manipulated the situation there, and then finally he had to flee from Laban. Laban and his sons were all ticked off at Jacob for manipulating the situation. So just look real quick at this background of character. Just look at the first word. Jacob grabbed, he tricked, he deceived, he fled, he manipulated, and he fled again. I'm sure if the history was to go on, if he hadn't had this encounter with God, there'd be a lot more fleeing. Have you ever known anybody like that? Who just kind of, is always scheming, he's always doing something, and then he's running away. He's always got this problem, this crisis that he's running away from. That's the kind of guy Jacob was. All right? Now, just a little bit more background, all right? Thanks for being patient. A little more background of leading up to this wrestling match, because there's a few things that are really important to understanding this wrestling match that Jacob had with God. And the first thing is as I said, Jacob remembered. He remembered that Esau had threatened to kill Jacob 20 years earlier. He remembered that. And so as he's fleeing from Laban, all right, he's fleeing from Laban, he's going back to his home country where Esau is. And he's kind of remembering this, that, Esau threatened to kill me. This is a little dangerous for me to be going back home, but, I got no place else to go, I guess. I'm going back home. So this is in the back of his head as he's fleeing from Laban, okay? And this night where he wrestled with God was as he was leaving. He's in transit from Laban, his uncle, to his home country, okay? And so he had fled from Laban, and now he sends out scouts. Jacob sends out some scouts because he has a huge company. At this point in time, he has 12 sons, and he has a huge amount of flocks. He's got 2 wives and 2 concubines, and huge amount of herds and flocks. So it's like a caravan, okay, moving across the land. It's huge. And he's got all of this stuff. So he sends out scouts, and he finds out, the scouts come back and report to him and say, yeah, we found your brother Esau, and he's coming with 400 men. 400 men. Not men, women, and children. 400 men. Whoa! I'd flip out. I'd freak out. I'd like, oh my gosh, I'm coming home. He's gonna make good on his promise. He's gonna kill me. And it's not just him. He's gonna kill everything I've got. Women, my wives, my children, everything. So Jacob, in the process of learning this and of continuing to try to travel and get to a safe place, he divided his whole caravan. He took half of his children and wives and flocks and put them in this kind of direction, and then the other half and put them in that direction, sent them out thinking, well, if Esau comes and attacks with his 400 men, his little army, maybe he'll only wipe out half of what I have, and the other half won't be so bad. And then at the last bit, he also sends away just those who are very closest to him, like his closest wife and his children. And Jacob divided all this, and then he remained alone. So he's alone in this wilderness, okay? All alone. He's got the dirt is his bed, the rock is his pillow, and the stars is his blanket, I guess. And he's sitting there alone, and then this guy, this angel, this God, it was really God, came and wrestles with him. How bizarre. So with all that background, let's read the story again. Let's interpret it a little bit. We've observed. Now let's interpret a little bit. So Jacob was left alone. He was alone. And a man wrestled with him till daybreak. Interesting little thing here. Jacob at this point in his life was an old man. He was about 96 or 97. And he wrestles with this man until daybreak. I don't know about you. I don't think I could wrestle anybody for more than maybe 15 minutes. And this guy, the powerhouse. Earlier in the Bible it said that Jacob was a mild man compared to his brother Esau, who was this, big-time hunter, always out. And he was a mild man that lived in tents. Well, he must have drank muscle milk or something, in his tent, because he became a wrestler, He wrestled with God, and he did it all night. Now, when the man, this man, it says man, but really in Hosea and in the rest of this passage, it's God. It's God. And the biblical term for that, the theological term, is a theophany. Or sometimes you'll hear the word Christophany. And what that means is God, at times in the Old Testament, would actually come to earth in the form of a man, and he would interact with people. And in this case, God is interacting with Jacob, and he's wrestling with him. Crazy. But God's wrestling with this guy. And curious enough, it says that this man, God, could not overpower him. And you'd think, well, it's God. Well, he could just pin him down right now. The curious thing about God is if you wrestle with God, and I know I've wrestled with God, is God doesn't pin you. He doesn't just take you out. He doesn't just force you into doing what he thinks you ought to do. He'll wrestle with you. If you want to fight with God, if you want to box with God, he'll do it. And he won't overcome you. But the trick, the rough part is you will never overcome God in that situation, and Jacob doesn't either. That's why they wrestled all night long. It was a stalemate. Neither of them got anywhere. God wouldn't overcome him, but Jacob couldn't overcome him. All right? Couldn't overcome God. And so as it's going on and on and on, morning is about to dawn, God, this man, just touched the socket of Jacob's hip. Just touched it, and it put it out of joint. Just boom. Now, could he have done that move earlier? Sure. But, he recognizes Jacob is not going to give up. I need to push Jacob a little bit farther. I'm not going to force him, but I need to push him just a little bit farther. And does not God do that with us? Does he not give us every reason to turn to him? Does he not put the screws to us sometime to get us to turn to him? That's what's going on here in Jacob's life. That's what's happening. And so his hip comes out of joint. And at that, the man said, let me go. It is daybreak. He's like, we've been at this all night long. Just let, Jacob the grabber, right? Jacob the heel catcher is holding on to God at this point. And he won't let go. Even with his joint out of hip, he won't let go. And the God says, let me go. We're at a stalemate. This is stupid. Let's just call it. All right, let me go. And Jacob says this, very important. Jacob says, I will not let you go until you bless me. Now, this might sound like he's in control. Might sound like I've got you, and you're not going to let me go until you bless me. No, not really. If you read the passage in Hosea, that gives a little bit more color to this. It says that Jacob wept. He wept at this point. And it's more a picture of, I can't go on unless you bless me. I can't go on. Please don't leave me. Please, I can't go on. I'm done. I am done. I can't go on unless you bless me. So the man asks one simple question. He says, well, what's your name? Now remember, years earlier, Jacob was in the presence of his father waiting to get a blessing. And Jacob and Isaac, his father, said, who are you, my son? Because he was a little unsure, He could sense that this isn't exactly like Esau. I'm expecting Esau. And what does Jacob say? I'm Esau. So years earlier, his father, in giving him a blessing, had said, what's your name? And he answered, Esau. Gives a little bit of color to why God would ask him a name. Of course, God knew his name. He didn't ask him, what's your name? Because God didn't know. Hey, what's your name? That wasn't the case. Okay? The case is that, he was testing Jacob. He wanted to hear him say, what's your name? And Jacob wisely answers just one word. Jacob, the heel catcher, deceiver, manipulator, liar. That's what he said. That's me. He confessed his position. Then the man said, and then here's where the switch happens for Jacob. Here's where this is, and you're probably thinking, how does this relate to the question we're trying to answer? How can I ever change? Well, notice the change that then happened. The man then said, God said, you will no longer be Jacob. No longer will you be called Jacob. You will no longer be Jacob, but Israel. Now, what does Israel mean? Israel means Prince of God. You will no longer be a manipulator, a liar, a heel catcher, cheater kind of a guy, a schemer. You will be a Prince of God. Not you will be called. I mean, that's what he was called. But the language here is very, very specific. You will no longer be Jacob. You will be a Prince of God. Significant change. That's why this story is pertinent to the question here, all right? And he gives the reason, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome. So, to finish up, let's go over the 4 steps on the back of your program here, on the back of the notes. Let's go over the 4 things, and actually there's 5. I got 4 fill-ins, but there's actually 5 things here that I want to look at. And look at the phases of real change, okay, the things that happen. Number 1, Jacob was in crisis. That's your first fill-in. He was in crisis. Remember, he was running away from Laban. He was running towards his brother with an army of 400 men. Not Jacob, it didn't have the 400. Esau had the 400 men, right? He's running towards him who had promised to kill him 20 years earlier. He had divided his family. My wife's on vacation right now, and I'm like distressed. I'm in crisis because she's gone with my kid. I'm all alone. He was left alone. And then this man's wrestling with him all night long. He was in crisis. I mean, heavy-duty crisis. I can't imagine having much more stress than Jacob had at this moment in his life. At 97, 96 years old, I don't know how I'd pop a vein. I'd have an aneurysm and just die on the spot. He made it, though. He kept on. And anyway, the important thing to know that he was in crisis. As the verse said below, the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he is also coming to meet you with 400 men. 400 men are with him. So that's the first thing that happens when change is coming in your life, is crisis. And you got to recognize that crisis. What do we normally do when we're in crisis, when trials happen? Well, I know I in the past have looked for relief elsewhere, right? Man, I got to find some relief. I got to escape. And we escape, with all kinds of things that we can do. Substances we put into our body, relationships that we chase after. I can't handle the stress that I'm in. I'm going to go find a girl, or I'm going to go find a guy, or I'm going to go find, some booze or something, some drugs or something to make me feel better. I'm going to escape the crisis, rather than maybe asking yourself the question, God's put this crisis in my life. What is He trying to teach me? What do I need to learn from this crisis? But normally we look at a crisis as a bad thing. James, in the book of James, he says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials," when you have a crisis. Because when you fall into these various trials, it will test your faith and produce patience. That's what he says. It produces patience. It produces growth. There's a change in you if you allow the crisis, the trial, to do what it's supposed to do. So don't try to escape from the crisis. All right, the second thing that Jacob did. This is what Jacob did. The crisis just kind of happened to him. Well, he kind of brought it on himself, right? All that stuff. And the crisis happened. And then Jacob, the second thing was he cried out. Jacob cried out to God. And here's that Hosea passage that I've been talking about. He took his brother's heel in the womb, and in his strength he struggled with God. Yes, he struggled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought favor from him. So like I say, normally in a crisis we go seeking relief from other people and other things, when in fact we should seek relief from God. We should cry out to Him, God, help me! Help me! Help me! Just cry out to Him. That's the second step, and Jacob did that. When he said, "I won't let you go until you bless me," that was him crying out. I can't go on without your blessing. I need you. He cried out. Okay? Then the third thing that Jacob did is he confessed. Jacob confessed what he was. He understood the question, "What's your name?" All right? And when he answered it, Jacob. So he said to him, the man said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." As I said, I am what I am. I'm a heel catcher. He confessed it. He said, "This is what I am." And you cannot affect change in your life. I cannot affect change in my life unless I see myself as I really am. We've talked about the definition of humility in the past, and pride. And humility, properly defined, is an accurate view of yourself. It's an accurate view of yourself. It's seeing yourself as you really are, or or more accurately even, it's seeing yourself as God sees you. That's what true humility is. Pride, the opposite of it, is believing something about yourself that isn't true. It's thinking you're all that. They're opposite terms, pride and humility. And so when Jacob confessed what he was, he was being a humble man at that point. He was finally moving away from being the schemer, the liar, the manipulator, the bad guy that he was. He confessed, "Yeah, that's what I am." And that's all you have to do. You don't necessarily have to make all these grand plans of how you're going to change. I mean, you should, that's part of the thing. But the very first step is just to say, "This is what I am. This is it. This is who I am." And until you do that, there's no change coming. There's no change coming. So number 4, the fourth thing that happened is God changed Jacob. God changed Jacob. Notice the verse, and he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel." That's a different translation. "But you shall no longer be Jacob, you shall be Israel." God did the changing there. Okay? It's not us that does the change, it's God that does the change. But here's the fifth thing. If you're taking notes, circle all 4 of these things. Put a big old circle around it and a little dash out there and write the word cooperation. Cooperation. All of these steps require your cooperation with God. When you're in crisis, you need to cooperate with God and recognize, hey, that crisis is here for a reason, and it's actually here for my good. It's here to prompt me to change. And I need to listen and hear and wake up to this crisis that I'm in and try to understand how I should change. I need to cooperate with God. When I cry out, I'm cooperating with God. When I confess, I'm cooperating with God. When God changes me, I'm also cooperating. I'm accepting that change. You know, Jacob could have said, I'm not Israel. Forget that. He could have walked out. He could have walked away. But he accepted the change. And then, I believe, moving on forward in his life, or my life, or any of our lives, that you got to continue to cooperate with God. When God says, do this, do it. When he says, don't do that, don't do it. Cooperate with God. Because God knows you better than anybody else knows you. He knows you better than yourself. He knows me better than I know myself. He knows what I need. He knows what will make me happy. He knows what will make me content. When I cooperate with him, and obey what he has to say, things go well for me. They go well. And they'll go well for you as well. Life is good when you cooperate with God. When you go against God and you try in your own way, that doesn't work out too good. Doesn't work out too good. So, those are how you can change. So back to the original questions. How can I stop doing this? How can I stop being this way? How can I lose those extra pounds as I started out with? Or how can I stop, being an addict or whatever? Well, how? Well, when that crisis comes, when your behavior brings on the crisis, go through these steps. Recognize the crisis, cry out to God, confess what you really are, let God change you, and then cooperate with him. Thank you very much.
Thank you.